beautiful and unique Gloss Mountains of Major County in northwest Oklahoma formed the backdrop for celebrating 100 years of God's faithfulness. This is the centennial celebration of Saron Mennonite Church on May 3rd and 4th, 1997. The church members worked the week prior to the anniversary, preparing the church and raising the tent for the weekend celebration.
Story of our quilting. We have quilted through the church here all these 50 years or so that I've been going, and a long time before our parents were quilting, and we did it twice a month. And then as the winter months we went into homes a lot of times so we wouldn't have to heat the basement. Christmas caroling, and they come around and then they come in and sing, and usually we offer them something to drink and eat if we can do that. This is Pastor Kirby and Grace, his wife, and Gina and Irene Buller and Randy Pinner. But we had a row of big trees around the front of the church, as well as the ones that are all around the back of the church.
When we were discussing what we were going to do for our 100-year celebration, the idea was thrown out that we might have a centennial cookbook, and we asked them at that time to go ahead and send us recipes, and we would try to compile a cookbook. And we got a good variety of recipes for our cookbook, and they've come from all over the country. We even have had some from our missionaries.
This is Heinrich P. Franz, my grandfather, and he was one of the charter members of the start of the church. Heinrich P. Franz was nearly a year old when his parents moved to Deutsches, Gopin District, Warsaw Province, Poland.
This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long.
Will your anchor hold through the storms of life?
We're here at Countryside Diner and Catering in Fairview getting ready for the banquet that we're going to have for our 100th centennial at the church for Saron Mennonite Church on Saturday, May the 3rd. We are here putting tablecloths on all the tables, and napkins and plants and flowers, and lots of preparation has gone into this, and we're hoping it looks real bright and springy when it's all done.
Redemption, the purchase
But I want to thank you all for coming. It's been a challenge to put this together.
I'd like to add my welcome. I'm Arnold Kirby, and I've had the privilege of being the pastor here now for 13 years, since 1984. And I'm glad we didn't do this for the 90th anniversary. Will your anchor drift or firm remain? We have an anchor that keeps the soul steadfast and sure while the billows roll. Fastened to the rock which cannot move, grounded firm and deep in the Savior's love.
The question is, what is a Mennonite? Mrs. France and I are still in the rental business in Fairview, and we'll have people come up from out of state, and we'll always welcome them to the Saron Mennonite Church. What's that about? Mennonite, do they stay up many a night or something like that? Or what's it all about? Well, no, the Lord took care of that many years ago. In fact, 400 years ago. Columbia sailed, that was 5, but we're, okay. 500 years ago, Columbia sailed the ocean blue in 1492, but in 1496, the Simons family in Holland, Friesland, Holland, had a son named Menno. You know where this is going to end, don't you? Okay. Most of the people then, because of the laws of the land, they were Catholics, as were the Simon family. When Menno seemed to be a very brilliant young man, and so they said, perhaps you should go into the priesthood. It's a real cushy job. All you have to do is take confessions and give the sacraments, and it's nothing to it. We'll give you a cut off of the when they say the confession, that would be $2.98. Well, you got 98 or whatever it was. But anyhow, Menno, he kept reading. And he read what Martin Luther said, the just shall live by faith. And Menno said, that's good, but shouldn't there be more? As he read his Bible, he said there needs to be regeneration and confession of sins. And so when he was presenting the sacraments, and that was supposed to be the blood of Christ and the body of Christ, he said, this can't be. And he said, I'm getting out of here. And sure enough, he was baptized 3 years later, and he started writing literature, but nobody would print it, because if they printed it, they'd be in trouble with the church and the state. So he bought his own printing press, and he distributed his beliefs. And the Mennonites flocked to him. They wanted him to be their leader, but he said, no, the leader gets beheaded. I can't say the other word, but it wasn't a good thing to be. So he went on to, and people were interested in it. And but what do we do with these Mennonites? Well, Holland says we got a bunch of swamps to clean. They're full of brush and whatnot, and the Mennonite will take that. And sure enough, they come in there, and in 100 years' time, they had that looking like the Garden of Eden. They built the big windmills, drained the swamps, and they didn't have bulldozers or carryalls to clean those things. They did it all by hand. And in 100 years, it was beautiful, but there were too many of them. The Mennonites read that portion in Genesis where it said, go out and multiply. They multiplied, divided, and everything. And they really gained people, and say, you got to get out of here. And one more funny belief Menno had, we can't kill anybody that's been created in the image of God. And Jesus said, those that take the sword will perish by it. Wow. And so these Mennonites were numerous. In fact, in the city of Amsterdam, there were so many Mennonites that the policeman was as lonely as our present-day Maytag repairman. In 50 years, he never made a Mennonite, arrested a Mennonite. It just had nothing to do. But still, they were hated because they wouldn't take part in the war. And so, well, one of the Prussian kings that said, hey, I've got a swamp to drain too, come over. And so for the next 100 days, they drained swamps in Germany, and so on, until they just finally got to where we find the names of some of our forefathers. Okay, you know, when the Pilgrims came to America, the King of England asked the Mennonites, why don't you come with them? My land's, that's halfway around the world. We don't want to go that far. So some did. Some went to Pennsylvania, as you know, and Germantown, Philadelphia was plugged with Germans. But you know, during the Revolutionary War, when the poor soldiers were freezing their toes off at Valley Forge, old George Washington was in a Mennonite home eating sweetbach and toasting his toes by the fireside. This is fact. I mean, this is not kidding me. All right. Going on, back to Holland and so forth. Catherine the Great said, hey, come over to Russia. They had the big steepies there in southern Russia, big flat plain, dark soil. And Catherine the Great had invited the Jews, and there were some Tartars there. These Tartars were a roaming band of people. And she said, maybe you Mennonites can teach these Jews some. They're pretty slick in business. They ain't worth a whoop-de-doo farming. So there came the Mennonites went in there. And they did a good job. Again, they prospered. And it just went from one thing to another, and I'm getting ahead of my notes. Okay. All right. By this time, there begin to be names that we know, the Ratzliffs and so forth begin. But there was one interesting thing that happened while they were in Prussia. They were not molested too bad, and so they thought maybe we should give the king and the queen were coming to visit the colonies. And so they appointed a man by the name of Abraham Nickel. You that ring a bell? Okay. And so old Abe, he went around, and what do you know, he gathered up $30,000. And Mrs. Nickel said, I need to do something too. So she went out and churned a whole basket full of butter to give to the queen. And you know, to this day, those nickels still butter up to people. So. You sit next to Andy, he'll sell you a steel building or give you a water tap from Major County Rural Waters. All right, going on. Okay, as I said, Catherine the Great invited them, and they were doing fine there. But what do you know? There was too many. There were too many, and they said, well, don't sell any more land to the Mennonites. And they said, well, you can go to Siberia, nobody up there, kind of cool, take your coats, but they didn't want to do that. So they had another choice. Their leaders said, well, Africa is asking us to come there. And am I glad we didn't go there? And America asked them to come there. And my land is halfway around the world. For those people to depart, as one lady said, it's just like tearing the heart out of my breast to leave my parents and so forth. And there were many Mennonites. There were 70,000 Mennonites in that Russia, Prussia, Polish area, and only 18,000 immigrated. There were a bunch of them that came, and it seemed like a lot, but they had to go, and they did choose. The Russians said, well, another reason they wanted to, the Russians started another war and said, you guys just got to help us. There's too many of you, and we got to fight. But they wouldn't. They said, we'll pull up stakes, and some were able to sell their property and get enough money for passage. After too many auctions, it doesn't pay to go to an auction because nobody's going to buy it or have an auction. So some came with what they could hold in their hands. But this was a very trying experience for them. So we're in Russia now, and the Mennonites are starting to pack to come to America. The Russians went to America to see what was out here, and Indians. So we went back. Those Indians will scalp you if you go. You better stick around here. We may mistreat you, but and the Mennonites said, what about this pact we have with Catherine the Great? You can be here for eternal. What's eternal? Oh, that's about 100 years. Okay, eternity was over with. And so the Tsar wept when they left because he knew what he was losing. And we understand that places where they lived have almost gone to nothing now, the people that go back there to see that. All right. I've got to get to the United States because I wasn't supposed to even say what I've already said. So in case you buy the picture show thing that they're going to sell, this will probably edited out. All right, we're coming to America. Most of you know what steamship your parents came on, and it was a trying experience. It was usually sometimes 13 weeks if the winds were contrary, and they couldn't make any headways. Many died on the ocean. They would wrap them in a shroud, tie a piece of iron on them, shove them overboard, down to Davy Jones's locker, and so forth. And it was a trying time for them. But as they came to Kansas, basically, as we know, the Santa Fe Railroad was granted land in the center of Kansas, and they wanted to have it settled. So yes, let's bring those Mennonites in. And there again, they came. They still multiplied, and before you know it, there were almost too many to be in Kansas. Halstead was loaded, Newton was loaded, Marion, Hillsboro, you name it, they were all there. And now we'll have to move again. And it's great how the Lord would open things up. And as we know, is 1893, the Cherokee Strip, which we are standing on right now, was opened, and free land was to be obtained. And that's when the Ratzliffs came, the Franzes and the Bullers and so forth. Some didn't make the run, but a couple of years after that, they would come in here and it was dry, and the people, some traded a shotgun and for their whole farm and walked on back to Kansas. And but our people stuck it out. At one time, there was 32 churches in Oklahoma, and now there are less than 19. We'll speak about that later, why they left and so forth. All right. As we said, we were very happy that some of the Mennonites did come to America way back in the 1600s. But when they heard that our forefathers, the helpless Poles as they were called, didn't have any money to spend the first winter or make a start in farming, there was a Mennonite concern, a Mennonite Board of Guardians, which is now our Mennonite Central Committee, and they send thousands of dollars and help our forefathers get a start here in Oklahoma and in Kansas. But here we are again in Kansas, and I better put my glasses on before I really mess up here. Okay. All right. Our forefathers came to this area. They came to Alamo. Alamo means many cottonwoods in Spanish, and that's Cottonwood Creek that goes just a little north of Orienta. The town was named Alamo. Of course, in 1903, when my father was herding sheep out on the riverside, the first train came through. It was the Orient line off of Santa Fe, and so they called the little town Orienta. As a result, our people, at first, they didn't know what to do. They were like sheep without a shepherd. But in 1896, Brother Christian Ramsar, who was living in Hillsboro, Kansas, he heard about the plight of the people here at Saron, and said, I've got to go over there. And he came, hitched up his two skinny horses. Brother Lorenz said Brother Ramsar had the skinniest horses. He didn't know how they could stand up, but it took 11 days to get from Hillsboro to here. But here he came, and he settled a mile west and a mile north on the place that Everett Hebert farms now, the Brunk place. And there he ministered, and he invited them to his home. Come to my house and we'll have a meeting. And they did. And then a few years later, there was a sod schoolhouse catacornered on what we call the Dobson place now. It was a sod schoolhouse. So they met there. By 1987, Brother Ramsar and Reverend Bartell urged the people to draw up a constitution and become a church. and some of our, there was one thing about our records. We're not sure of who all the charter members were. We are sure that the Buller boys that are here, Leo, Cleophas, and there's another one, Alva's here. Their father was one of the charter members, their father and mother. And grandparent France were also charter members. But there were a few others. There were Gertzes that went here, and Bartels, and another Ratzl family, and so forth. But in 1905, Brother Ramsire heard about the Mennonites in Alabama that don't have a pastor. He said, I've got these guys going, why shouldn't I leave? Boy, that just knocked the wind out of the sail of these poor people here in Saron Mennonite. But he did leave, and the General Conference of Mennonites sent John Ratzlaff from Menu and to encourage us to hang in there. And they appointed D.F. Ratzlaff, excuse me, and D.D. Lorenz were appointed as evangelists to take over. All right. They needed to be established. The Lorenz family sold them the plot where we have our cemetery now for a whole $1. So we owned that. We could have a place to bury them. Otherwise, there was a little cemetery west of where the elevators are now, and they were buried there. But we had this, and we invited anyone in the community, and still do, to bury their loved ones there. All right. And some of the people, like the Adam Ratzlaff family, originally settled on a place a mile north of Fairview. His wife almost drowned. They have a mean creek. When they have a storm, a big rainstorm, that creek comes up, and Mrs. Ratzlaff, I understand, almost drowned there. So they picked up stakes and moved west, north, and west. Mostly west and north. Okay, straight north. I finally did it. This tent is disorienting me here. All right. But since they were so scattered, the Bullers out in the hills, the Middle States across the river, Mile Lands, let's get something more centered. So Mrs. Hulda Karp owned this quarter where we're sitting on. She said, I'll sell you a corner here for $70. Wow, that's a lot of money, but they needed it, and they did take her up on that, and here we are today. And 1907, we built a wooden church. We quit meeting in the schoolhouse. And there were 37 members at that time, and things were going pretty good. All right, I have a disagreement here, but all right. Thank you, Grace. You know, at that time when the history was kind of silent, from 1907 to 1912, and 9 members became discontent with what was going on here, and they moved. And I'm sure then, as we still do now, wondering, is Saron Mennonite basically here just to make members for other churches? Maybe so. But you know, I always felt, wherever you can do the best job of praising God, glorifying Him, go there. We're all for you. Many years ago, Brother Waldo was here, and he thought 40 years ago we wasn't going to make it another 10 years. And Waldo, I'm glad we hung in there, and you're here this morning. And we're here, and like I say, if we lose a member, I say fine. About in that time, the Pentecostal group came to Fairview. We lost a couple of families there. They thought perhaps they were a little more excited than we are, and I wouldn't doubt that. But time went on. In 1911, OBA came into being, and in 1912, Brother J.B. Epp, who is the father of Dr. Theodore Epp, preached the first English sermon at the Oklahoma Convention. It went down in history, because by George, we speak German around here. All right. Okay. J.B. Epp was our pastor, at least to give us 3 weeks out of a month, and so forth, and we had some trying times. And I'll never forget one Sunday morning. It was during harvest time. In those days, we didn't have the combines. We did have the binders, and then we'd shock the wheat. I got to stay here and talk. Shock the wheat and so forth. Everybody was tired, and so we did have a pastor, but Uncle John France was the superintendent, And I'll never forget, we was trying to sing a song, and we were so tired, we couldn't get through it. And the pianist stopped playing, and Uncle John said, let's stand up and pray. And he said, Lieber Heiland, bitte sende uns ein Hirten. Lord, please, send us a shepherd. And he did. Okay. Time went on, and Brother Croker came, and Brother August Schmidt were also appointed to be our pastors. You just can't get as old as I am and still remember this stuff, but I remember when I was a little lad, I couldn't get up the rostrum, and but Brother Herman Buller was the superintendent. It was a Christmas program. Those were great. And he helped me up, and I was about as big as this thing maybe, and I said, Ich bin noch klein, kann nicht viel sagen, doch ich will's wagen und ein Sprüchlein sagen. And, I'm just a little twerp, I can't say much, but I wanted to give it a whirl. Okay. We remember other great occasions. I remember the Frank Ham wedding. I see Carlton and Clayton here today. I'll never forget that wedding because a young man got up on the stage and he gave the poem by Walter Foss, The House by the Side of the Road. And I said, by George, I'm going to memorize that if it takes me my lifetime, and it almost did. But I do know how to say it. Sometime we'll go out and back to the tent and I'll recite it to you. All right. Going on. Many other hysterical things happened back there. In 1915, Mrs. John France spoke on the family at a convention. That was another first because women were not allowed to speak at the convention. In 1917, again, Mrs. John France Ontina suggested the convention have a sing fest instead of just 3 days of business. So the first Sing-spiration that we used to celebrate happened there. Okay, in the 1917, it was a rough year for the Mennonites. Again, they still wouldn't go to war, and here we are in Fairview, Oklahoma, and in Orienta. Major county people posted a little notice on our church door. It said, "Notice, God Almighty understands the American language. Address him only in that language. Do not remove this card." All right. I'm afraid they took the card and burned it the next Sunday morning when they built the fire, but anyhow, I lost my place here. Okay. They did have a tough time. Some of the merchants didn't want them to come into the stores, but some merchants were smart. They hired Mennonite people that could understand English, because the immigrants would come in and buy and talk to this lady and buy their goods. So that's the way it was. And some banks didn't even want to deposit Mennonite money. They made it as bad for them as they could. All right, going on. I'm really going fast here. Gee, man. Okay. After World War I, we went back to the German language, and in 1925, Brother Lorenz, who had served us many, many years, became ill and said he just couldn't carry on. I remember Brother Lorenz. He was a short man. He didn't get as big as Gene and Norman did, but he was a little, and he always had a smile for me, and I always appreciated that. And I remember when he got so ill he couldn't think straight like me today, but he would read the sermons, and we even appreciated that. But after that, we called Brother A.A. Evert from Tampa, Kansas, and he was an educated man. He preached like real preachers are supposed to, dearly beloved, and he'd raise his voice, raise himself over the ground, and that. But he had a nice family, and we remember Jonathan, Otilla, and all of the children there. It was a great time. He lived on the farm across the road from Waldon's there. And it was in 1932 or something. I put a 193, didn't whatever. That's when we built our new brick church, at least. Okay, somewhere in the 30s. And that is when we put the rim of trees around, which yesterday we were very happy they were there. We had a rim of trees around here. That was after the Dust Bowl years, and free trees were to be had. We planted the Chinese elm and the arborvitae cedars around, and Brother Dan Ratzlaff had owned the land across the road, and there was a big plot of trees, I think about an acre or so of trees there, where some churches, or sometimes we had our church picnics out there, and so forth. And time went on, and JBF was still, no, we're past that, we're with Eberts, all right. And Brother Lorenz, incidentally, was 36-year-old where he finally passed on to his reward, and he certainly needed that. It just amazes me. I'll never forget. I was just a little shaver, and they picked me up to look at Brother Lorenz in a white suit. Great! You were ready to meet the Lord. But some of the old sisters said that shouldn't have been. It should be a dark suit when you die. But
It wasn't 36.
pardon?
You said he was 36.
No, he had served 36. Sorry if I didn't make that clean. He served 36 years, so you've got a few years to go, Arnold. Okay. When Brother Epp lived here, he lived in Fairview. He lived straight north of the Hotel Knelson. I'll never forget his wife, Mrs. Epp. Every morning, my uncle had the service station across the street from Hotel Knelson, and she'd come in, she'd walk all the way. It was about, Wes, how far do you live from Hotel Knelson? 5-6 blocks? 5 blocks. And she would walk that and put tracks under every salesman's windshield wiper. And when they'd come out to our house at dinner, all once she'd disappeared during the day. Where's Mrs. Epp? Oh, here she comes. Okay. We'd gather eggs that evening, and all the eggs had John 3:16 written on them. Now, are you all witnessing that well? Okay. Brother Theodore Epp was a colorful young man. As he lived here, he worked for us in the harvest crew, and he was a little short man. And we had our headers. The header was a machine that just cut the heads off the wheat, elevated it into a barge. And Brother Ted would be in the barge, but they'd cover him with hay, and he'd peek through the slats to see where he was going. And he liked to eat. And my mother was a good cook, and one time they ate a big dinner, and as they harnessed the horses, or took the horses to go to a farm that we had half a mile south. Brother Epp was leading the parade, the convoy, okay, and all once he stopped and say, hey, Ted, what's wrong? He said, there's some mulberries up here. If we don't get them now, they'll be falling to the ground by evening. So he had a motto. He said, I'm too small for big work, and I'm too big for little work, so I shouldn't work. In 1940, January, cold day, a sad thing happened. I looked to the east. I was on the farm 3 miles west of here, and looked in a billow of smoke. By that time, the general ring. You remember when we made about 20 rings? Everybody came to the phone. Not that they hadn't before, anyhow. But they said that the Saron church is burning. Wow. It burned. And next June, we had the new church dedicated. There were 140 members at that time. In 1943, Brother H.P. Fast came to be our pastor. Brother Fast was a disciplinarian. Cartman Clayton, you remember when you had to sit up straight? And you Hebert boys? Yeah, all right. All right. But he's the only pastor that ever did take me on the carpet. Not that more shouldn't have, but he did make me apologize to the board and so forth one time. And we won't say why. Okay. He was a fantastic Bible teacher. We'll always be indebted to Brother Fast, because he did know how to describe the Bible, to do the Bible. All right. In 1951, guess who came? Waldo and Mrs. Flickinger and two mean kids. All right. Brother Waldo's sitting here. You are standing? No, you're sitting. Okay. All right. One day we were having a Christmas party, not a Christmas, a choir party at our house, and Brother Flickinger's walking there, and there was half a dozen kids playing the player piano, and the rest were playing shuffleboard or rolling the ball down the bowling alley. It was so much noise. Brother Flickinger said to me, "You know, this just sounds like a dance hall." I said, "Brother Flickinger, what do you know about dance halls?" Brother Flickinger came here from the Go Ye Missions, and he said their favorite song was "I'll Fly Away." And he told them he wished they wouldn't all fly away if they'd stay there and get to work. But he hoped we didn't like that song. So, all right. Then, after they finally got tired of it, no, I don't remember why they left, but they did leave. Brother Flickinger went with Youth for Christ, I believe, overseas and all that good stuff. Maybe he'll tell us more about that another time. But we did appreciate his ministry. I might say one thing about Omar, if he's sitting here too. I bought a 1952 Power Glide Chevrolet, and I came to choir practice with it, and Omar came up to me afterwards and said, he and old Leo Becker, is old Leo here? Anyhow, I want you to give us a ride, see what kind of zip this car you have. Well, I took him out here, and I barely knew how to drive a Power Glide, and I slowly went down to Den Rastus and turned around, and they said, "Phooey." And what they had done, they put a piece of inner tube, bicycle inner tube, on my exhaust pipe. And if I'd have gunned it, it went like that. But I never gunned it, so Marvin confessed what he'd done and pulled it off. All right. Okay. Okay. I also remember Mrs. Flickinger was at our house one time, and we got the new piano roll, "It Is No Secret What God Can Do." It's beautiful, but on the end they put da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Mrs. Flickinger said that ruined the whole song. All right. In 1955, Mrs. and Mr. A.C. Siebert came to join us. I'm sure we all remember them. There was a bunch here that do. Mrs. Siebert had a fantastic display of flannelgraphs, which she used a lot, and she was a beautiful cook. Pastor Siebert used to say, "That's a sneaky way to kill a husband." All right. We're really getting around. We've been somewhere in 100 years, 400 years. We were over here in 1963. And that is the one, and that was when my father and I hooked onto a U-Haul trailer and went clear up to Wolf Point, Montana. My father said, "How come the Mennonites got so far from home?" All right. It was exactly 1,200 miles to their driveway from our driveway. And there we loaded up when Brother Hubert saw, this is Frank and Mrs. Hubert, were at Wolf Point. When they saw that U-Haul trailer would be, how much, anyhow, it's not big enough to take what we got. So we pushed and shoved and filled my pickup, and they came. I'll never forget that going away party. We got there the day before, and that night they had a going away party. and everybody didn't like the looks of us. So me and my dad, we sat in the back seat. And the moderator got up and said, "What will happen to those poor little twin girls?" And here they are today. So they made it. They came to very warm Oklahoma, and we have enjoyed their ministry a lot. I'll never forget one night we were out Christmas caroling, and yeah, all right. And we were getting kind of giddy. It was after midnight already, and we were singing at the Lorenz home, and someone had left a little wagon sitting out there, and it was dark. And Mrs. Hubert says, "I'm tired. I'm going to get in this wagon. Would somebody pull me?" She sat down in the wagon. She didn't realize it was 3/4 full of water. So at least we had to come home and change, Mrs. Hubert. All right. All right. It was during, incidentally, I went too fast. I should have mentioned we were happy to have Brother and Mrs. Norman Lorenz were here, and that was during Brother H.P. Fast ministry here that we celebrated our 50th anniversary. And we finally sent it out, after 50 years, we finally sent out a missionary. And Brother Fast was elated to that fact, and so were we. And since that time, we've had so many good people from here that have gone. Vernon and Mrs. Buller are here. He went into the pastor business. That isn't the real way to say that, but okay. And Mrs. Walter Gosen and so forth have come from this church, and we've had wonderful results in that situation. I better get back to my notes. Okay, and here we are. What do you do when you can't read your writing? Okay, just go to the next point, all right? In 1971, what the notation was when Brother Hubert was here, when Brother Siebert was here, he begged us to make an addition to our church. Said we need more classrooms, we need the inside facilities like we don't have today, and so he preached that as long as he was here, and then when Pastor Hubert got here, we finally got on the ball and did that. It sure is a help for us. All right, in 1971, we had to go clear to British Columbia, Canada to get a preacher. I mean, nobody in an era would touch us with a 10-foot pole. And Brother Sam and Sadie Epp came, and if you've ever been in British Columbia, that's one of the garden spots of the world. And they came here in September when it was hot and dry. And Brother Epp said, we went out and showed him the glass mountains. He said, "My, this is God-forsaken country." Then he apologized. "I'm sorry, I know." He said, "Maybe this is what God left over after he made the rest of the world." So. All right. We enjoyed their son, Brad. He attended OBA while he was here, and now we're proud to say that he is one of our missionaries in Botswana. And we're very happy to have Mrs. Epp here with us this morning. Brother Sam was not able to come, but we wish he were here also. All right. In 1976, guess who came? And they're here today. Don and Mrs. Crisp. They were a younger pastor than we were used to. We had a lot of learning to do, and maybe they did too. And we enjoyed their ministry here immensely. Okay, in 1984, again, we were without a pastor. As we as the council, I wasn't on the church board at that time, but on the council to select ministers. We had resumes from the Bible schools and seminaries, and most of them wanted a village at least 10,000. And Alamo, Marietta, Cleo Springs, Fairview, we couldn't get 5,000 out of all that. And so it was there again, we think it was God's leading. I was attending a series of meetings in the Church of the Brethren east of Alene. Our son and his wife and children went to that church. They invited us to the meeting. We came there, and there was a young man got up and he played the guitar, and he didn't beat the tar out of the guitar like most guitar people do. And Arnold strummed a song, and they introduced him, said he had been a pastor in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but his wife's mother was very ill, and so they came back to Ewed, Oklahoma. That's Ewed is between Cherokee and Cleo Springs, or Alene, or someplace. It's not easy to find, because I remember going back to Brother Flickinger when he was here. He said Orienta had 2 streets, Peak and Plum. You peek around a corner, you're plumb out of town. All right. Yes, and again, I couldn't wait till that meeting was over at the Church of the Brethren, and I crawled over the benches to get to Brother Arnold, and I said, Arnold, have you ever heard of Mennonites? You mean the hook and eye people, bearded and all that? No, we're just playing. And I said, we're looking for a pastor, and may I send you a constitution? See what Mennonites believe. He was a Baptist. So he did read our constitution. We had him here for a trial sermon, and we were desperate, and okay. It was his in his turn where we did an awful thing in the eyes of some people. We joined the Fellowship of Evangelical Bible Churches. We did think they had a more positive mission outreach and a more evangelical stance than we had been used to. And we've made that. If some of you were offended, we apologize, but we are enjoying the fellowship. It's always a pleasure to go to the conferences where they preach the Word. There's never a doubt, is this really God's Word, as sometimes we had been exposed to. All right. As I said before, there was 32 original Oklahoma churches. Now there are less than 20. Some of the reasons why, they passed away, passed on. They wouldn't turn loose of the German language. They didn't want evangelical preachers. They might stir us up emotionally, get us all excited. And they died on the vine, as it were. There were other economic reasons for them leaving. The farms got bigger and so forth, and they had to move on. At this time, and there are most every state in the Union, I believe, have Mennonite people in them. And we just can't see the Church of Jesus Christ as dying. You know, you talk about a dying church. Well, it's the fault of the people there, and we just pray the Lord that He will keep us faithful, and if it is only to make members for other churches, if you go there, praise the Lord, and do everything to God's glory. All right. I've forgotten my program. I don't know when we're supposed to stop for lunch, but Brother Nichols said he'd have a microphone down here, but I think I can remove this one. If you'd care to come up and say a few words in respect. If we don't like what you say, we'll always edit it out. And but if there's anyone that cares at this time to come up here and say hi, whatever. Like I say, we've got some memories out here. They're fantastic. Old Waldo always used to crank up the 32 volt because the lights would get dim at Christian Endeavor. While you're coming up here, I got one more incident to speak. One time we were still in a little wooden church. The highway went by here incidentally until 1934 when the pavement was built on the other side of the railroad. So the people would come by, toot the horn, you know, and all the big boys, old Leo and them guys knew whose car it was just by the sound of ooh-ah or beep, beep, whatever. And so one time a motorcycle roared into the churchyard at Christmas Eve. And we all turned our heads to the door, see who had a motorcycle. In come 2 people, a man and a woman, and she had pants on. They didn't have helmets in those days, but they pulled off the goggles. And there were two white eyes. I mean, their faces were burned red from the wind, but when they took the goggles, they were two white eyes looking at us. And she had the audacity to sit on the men's side. Of course, at Christmas time, we passed out the toots. You remember we called them toots, little bag of candy and so forth. And they each took a toot. And as soon as the service was over, they thanked the people in back that they let us come in and warm up and got the toots. They had a good time after that. But we all followed them out, and they jumped on that old big Harley had a sidecar. He was on. Away we went. I always wanted to have a sidecar. Never made enough money to buy a motorcycle and a sidecar.
When we started, we had 16 members in our mission society. Of course, we had over 100 church members then too. Now we're down to only 4 of the ladies in church. We have 2 guests that help us quilt. And we have different projects through the years. We have made the Christmas bundles, layouts, Indian projects, the gifts to the missionaries, and our work consisted mostly of tying comforts and quilting. And I don't know where all these quilts went to, but I know the comforts were given away to a lot of people.
Just quickly wanted to ask the old timers if they remember the Gesangsbuch mit Noten, the first books we have. Okay, yeah. I always wondered why they said songbook with notes. Don't all songbooks have notes? No, our parents in Russia couldn't even read. And so they made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 instead of A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And they sang that away.
I just have to say something. This is the guy that called me long-winded.
I think it's about time to break for dinner.
Oh, the joy of knowing Jesus. Oh, the peace of mind he brings. Now secure in him I'm resting. Daily now my glad heart sings. Secure in Christ I walk along life's pathway. Secure in Christ I journey day by day, with God himself as my divine protection. I am secure, no need to fear the word.
Well, we're gonna be having fun eating pizza tonight.
Okay, I'm Ella France. I'm head of the food committee, and today is Saturday. And our menu is Sloppy Joe's. That's made our church famous by our Sloppy Joe's. And we're going to have a red Jello salad, chips, pickle, and our good old homemade pies. You didn't know anything about it. I don't know what I'm looking at. Oh, hi.
I'm Donald Crisp. I'm from Wichita, Kansas. I pastored here from 76 to 83.
My name is Betty Goddard. I used to be Betty Lorenz, and I was brought up by Reverend D.D. Lorenz, who was pastor of this church for 36 years.
Yes, I'm Sadie Epp, the wife of Sam Epp, who is now not able to come because he's in a nursing home back home in Manitoba. But we came here in 1971 and ministered until 1976.
Great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will be. Great is thy faithfulness,
There's only two ways you can get a Mennonite to stop talking. One is eat, and the other is sing. So we already had done the first, so I thought we'd better do the second. I need to do my part for Mennonite history. How many of you know how copper wire was invented? Anybody? I know my wife does. Two Mennonites were fighting over a penny.
I didn't really know. I thought I said my speech this morning, but I had one incident I wanted to mention to you that happened as I was a little lad, and every Christmas we had to get up and say our piece, and our mothers would drill us and drill us. I mean, that was still in the German language also. And we had one problem. Alvin had a cousin that would come down from Oklahoma City, Lamar Miller. You remember Lamar? Hillsborough, that's where she at. Okay, that's real. Yeah. Okay, Lamar would come down here and he'd have a Buster Brown suit on, a little big tiny grin, and all the girls, you know. And worst part of it, he'd get up there and he would say, Selig sind die reines Herzen, denn sie werden Gott schauen. Okay. Oh boy. On the way home, Mother would say, why can't you speak like Lamar? All right. So, one time we knew Lamar was coming, and we told Alvin, why don't you whisper in Lamar's ear that we don't appreciate that? And so as we sat, Benton, Ratzlaff, and I sitting in the front, pretty soon as Lamar got up here, you know, we were pacifists, not in the right sense. So old Lamar comes up here, and his mother was way back smiling. Say it loud enough so I can hear. We didn't have PA systems then. Old Lamar got up here and he looked down at us, old Ben and me. Then, old Lamar took little finger, his little pinky, and went up his nose. And all once his mother was saying, Selig sind die, he wouldn't say anything. All once he said, pulled it out and he said, Mutter, ich hab was in my nose. I got something on my nose. All right, and back it went. Looked at us, and so she begged him to say it, and he wouldn't say it. Mutter, ich hab was in my nose. All right. She finally had to get him up here and lead him off the stage. We haven't heard of Lamar since.
My first recollection of this church was in 1940 when the brick building was dedicated.
Brother Cleophas, go ahead.
I appreciate the Mennonite way, the Mennonite singing. Oh, it's so beautiful. I really have enjoyed it this far. Oh, and I wanted to say this about Elmer. I think he's done a beautiful job of all of this records and all that he brought up this morning. I like Elmer.
And my heart is here at Saron Mennonite Church. I have a spot in my heart where I got saved. Praise God.
I'm glad I belong to the Lord. He set me free, and I'm free indeed. And so thank you for everything you've done. I appreciate all of this, and to all of you.
Well, you may not know this, but this church has two foundations. Now, when the first brick church burned down, I was at the meeting. They decided that the foundation was not good enough to be built on. So outside of the first foundation is another one that this church has been built on.
I remember a lot of things from this church, and they all seem to be like snapshots, but some of the things that I remember, and I'm sure some of you do too, are like Elmer's Chalk Talks, and also I remember Harry Wickard, when the Wickards would get up and sing. Harry, I can still hear the sound of that guitar in my mind, and also Reverend Hubert when he used to lay out the tabernacle and all the different lessons that he would do.
I told Roxy here a minute ago, we don't hear this kind of singing where we are in Tahlequah because those groups never learned to sing like the Mennonite people did.
I learned to know the people here at Orienta,
and I learned to appreciate them very much. There was a good group at that time in 1942 that came here, and they were wonderful Christian people.
I want to share with you what happened the first time I preached in Saron Mennonite Church as the pastor back January 29th, 1984. As I was standing back there at the back of the church, I remember Brother John Lorenz coming up and grabbing my hand and just getting right in my face. By that time he could barely see, and he shook my hand and got right up in my face and said, "Pastor, I love you." And I remember that every Sunday he would tell me that, and what an encouragement that was to me.
I found a friend, oh such a friend, he loved me ere I knew him. He drew me with the cords of love, and thus he bound me to him. And round my heart still closely twined those ties which can't be severed. For I am his and he is mine, forever and forever. I found a friend, oh such a friend, he bled, he died to save me, and not alone a gift of life, but his own self he gave me. Not that I have my own, I hold it for the giver.
I'm Jim Hebert. I live in Springfield, Missouri, and I'm not here very much. So I didn't know what to expect when I got here. But I'm amazed and I'm surprised and I'm pretty proud, aren't you? Of what has happened here in this small group. We're going to hear from Pastor Don with a little message and greetings. Where's Pastor Don?
I want to express my thanks to you for inviting me here to the Centennial, and also for your prayers, your encouragement, and your support during the years that I was here.
Our next number is special music by Alan and Jackie Hubert.
And he knows where I am every hour of every day. He knows each thought I think. He knows each word that I might say. And although there were times I stepped out of his will, I've never been out of his care.
Someone from our church and with some other churches got together and started the Oklahoma Bible Academy. I understand that Adam Rasliff gave some money and some buildings and those kinds of things to make that happen. And I don't know about you, but I'm grateful for that school for what it did for me.
Good evening again. Shall we step back in time about 60 years during the dirty 30s? The Saron Mennonite Ladies Mission Sewing Circle are having their Wednesday meeting in the church basement. Some of their husbands lovingly refer to them as the Stitch and Chatter Sisters. May I introduce to you Gertie and Bertie. They very seldom miss the meeting because they feel that their presence keeps the meeting on a higher plane. And if they are absent, if they're not absent, no one can talk about them. Go ahead.
My, isn't it dry? Our well went dry. And do you know what we had to do? We had to dig a well in the bottom of the creek bed so that we could dip enough water for the cows and the chickens.
Well, our cistern went dry, so we had to hire John Jansen's wooden water wagon for $1 a day to haul water from Fairview. The water wagon leaked so bad, we had to run those poor horses all the way and make 2 trips a day to get our dollar's worth.
Well, it's so dusty in Beaver County, my sister-in-law says, that they have to put a damp cloth over their face at night so that they won't breathe in that fine dust. And you know, every morning they scoop a full shovel full of dirt out of their house.
Really? Well, the other day, Carl Wickard had to send the kids home from school because the dust was so thick from the west, it got dark at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
My, and have you noticed that the prices of our farm stuff is terrible? We had to sell our wheat for 28 cents a bushel. And would you believe hogs are 5 cents a pound? Speaking of hogs, we went to Adam Ratzliff's Sunday afternoon. You know, we parked our Model T in front of their house and got out. The wind was from the south, and whew, the smell of those 100 or more pigs south of the house hit our noses. I said to Adam, "How can you stand this?" He just sniffed the air and said, "Smells like money to me."
Well, we sold some ducks that we raised to John Ratzliff's Produce in Fairview for 5 cents a pound. He had some pretty feed sacks, so we bought enough feed so I could make a dress. I don't know why he has to have the prettiest patterns at the bottom of the stack, but I made him move them till I got the pattern I wanted.
Well, the Mission Society will soon have enough things made for our annual mission sale in the church basement. Waldo Ratzliff is a pretty good salesman.
Yes, he is, but his father has such a big family and buys most of the pillowcases and quilts and other stuff. Waldo has a pretty easy job.
Well, 10 more years have passed. I see Bertie and Gertie going into the 5 and 10 cents store in Fairview. It was called the Red Front Store because they painted the front bright red as a barn. It's a favorite Mennonite store, almost as good as Cress's and Enid. I doubt if they'll buy anything. They just go in there, see how much the prices have changed since the war is coming on.
My, isn't that war talk getting bad? It sounds like we're going to have to stop speaking German in church.
I think that's terrible. Don't you know God spoke German?
No, did he really?
Yes. In my German Bible, in Genesis 3 verse 9, when God was looking for Adam and Eve in the garden, after she ate the apple and gave Adam the core, God said, "Adam, wo bist du?" Well, ain't that talking in German or what?
Well, what do you know? I sure didn't know that.
And I feel so sorry for our Mennonite boys that are faced with the draft. I hope it won't be as bad as it was in World War I.
You know, those who had to go before the draft board with Mrs. Early and Doc Johnson almost have to be preachers to get a 4E conscientious objectors classification.
Well, the church is now leaving it up to the individual to pray about it and let the Lord lead. And the church will stand behind them whichever way they choose. I hope you're planning to go to the Nay Verein meeting Wednesday. I am, because I'm sure anxious to get that flower garden quilt done.
Another 5 years have passed. The ladies are meeting in different homes because the price of coal has hit the ceiling, and it takes a lot of heat to heat the church basement. I'm sure Bertie and Gertie will be there. They wouldn't think of missing a meeting at Aunt Elizabeth France's house, even though they'll gain a few pounds while eating there.
Well, I'm sure glad the war is almost over. Thank God none of ours were killed.
Yes, but it sure has messed things up in church. Our boys and girls used to marry each other. like Herman Buller married Hulda Kane, Bill France married Elizabeth Kane, Otto Ratzlaff married Nora Bartell, Valeria Buller married Frank Ham, and so on. Now the boys and girls are marrying English people. Alva Kane married a girl from Kalamazoo, Michigan, Edwin Buller, a girl from Oregon, and Freddie Middlestate, a Goodnow girl from Alene. Herman Buller got a girl from Indiana. Norman Lorenz, a girl from Ohio. And poor Elmer France had to go all the way to Maine to find a girl that would even marry him. I think his mother, Emma, was beginning to think no one would take him.
Well, the girls are marrying English boys, too. You know, Leela Regier married Elmer Davis, and Hilda France married Guy Parks, a highway patrolman. Her brother said she needed that because she was the world's worst driver.
Well, yes, and Ruby Ratzlaff married Bob Reams. Martha Middlestate married a Thomas boy from Alene. Anita Lorenz married Jamie Robinson from Arkansas. And Betty Lorenz married Bob Goddard from who knows where. Poor Lena Lorenz, having to accept all those outsiders in her family.
Well, at least some of our young people married Mennonites, even if they had to go out of the community to find them. Wesley France, James Hebert, and Vernon Hebert all found girls in the Mennonite church. Gene Lorenz had to go all the way to Kansas to find a girl that would marry him. But I'm sure his mother, Lena, was just so thankful to get a Mennonite daughter-in-law. Ruby Bullard married one of those other Mennonite boys from Enid. But you know, he seems like a nice enough young man, not as liberal as some of them are.
Well, I sure hope this won't bring in too many worldly ways. Herman Buller, our choir director, has had to tell some of the girls to quit wearing lipstick on Sunday morning if they want to sing in the choir.
Yes, and you know what the church board had to do? The church board and the pastor asked the trustees to put up a 3-foot enclosed railing in the front of the stage. Seems like the girls are growing out of their dresses. They're above the knees already.
Oh, Gertie, what is this world coming to?
Another 10 years have gone by. We're meeting in the Mrs. Adam Ratzlaff home today in Fairview. Bertie and Gertie are looking forward to the time when they can move into town. They can't wait to get out of the red mud and onto pavement and have private telephones. Although they will occasionally listen in on the party line. Not that they're snoopy or anything, just listening to see if they could be of service to someone or so in the community.
My, hasn't it been hot lately? It was so hot in church Sunday morning, all the little kids were really fussy. Seems like more kids were getting up during church and going to the outhouse behind the church. I think they really were just trying to get a breath of fresh air.
I don't know what we would do if the funeral parlor didn't furnish us these nice wooden-handled fans.
Yes, it was so hot last night, my kids all slept out in that screened-in porch. During the day, we even hung wet tea towels over the open windows to cool things down.
Yes, and some of our butter and cream that we hung down in the cistern got sour.
By the way, did you hear that Ernest Vos got an ice box that plugs into electricity? The Iceman doesn't even go there anymore. How can they afford something like that?
Well, maybe his teaching job pays better than farming. We feel so fortunate to have a radio. In the evenings, we can sit and listen to Fibber, McGee, and Molly, and Amos and Andy. Who would have dreamed we would be able to keep up with the world news like we can now?
I just hope it doesn't bring too many worldly ideas for our young people. You know, they told me that Kenneth Kane is dating a girl who wants to be a doctor. How in the world does she think she can stay at home and raise a family and also be a doctor?
The girls nowadays are just getting too bold. Did you notice the way some of them have bobbed their hair? Why, Andy Nickel married that girl from Iowa, and she's got bobbed hair. I don't think God intended for girls to have short hair.
Yes, and some of the girls are even getting their own cars. This could lead to all kinds of trouble. Why, soon they won't even need men. This surely can't be scriptural.
Another 10 years. How old can a person get? Gertie and Bertie are growing older and bolder. Reminds me of a little song that the worldly boys in high school used to sing. I'm growing older, she's growing bolder. Someday I'll hold her, head on my shoulder. And in my future life, she's gonna be my wife. How in the world did you get that way? She told me so.
Have you met our new pastor's wife, Mrs. Hubert? My sister knows someone from their former church, and she said she is a good housekeeper. You know, it says in the Bible, cleanliness is next to godliness.
Oh, really? I didn't know that was in the Bible, but it must be as important as it is.
Oh, yes. I can't remember where it's found, but anybody who knows their scripture knows that's in the Bible.
Have you seen those little twin girls? They sure are cute. I bet they'll be a handful when they get older.
My, isn't it nice to sit in a nice air-conditioned church? The Lord has certainly blessed us with a nice place to worship.
But have you noticed, though, Bertie, that now that we have a cool church and comfortable padded pews, how many people fall asleep during the message? Maybe God didn't intend for us to be that comfortable in church.
Another 10 years. Bertie and Gertie are mellowing a lot. Admitting a bit. Mellowing, kind of like an overripe banana. But I like overripe bananas. Green ones taste like grass. And they smell like cow's breath on green wheat pasture.
What did you think about the church dinner we had last Sunday?
Well, it was good, but I don't think my pie was made from scratch. It certainly didn't taste like Mrs. Epp makes. She could sure teach those young women a thing or two about cooking.
Wasn't that a nice program, though, that the little kids gave in church last night? It's so good to see a whole stage full of little children perform.
Yes, and Mary Longhofer certainly knows how to put on a good program. She really puts a lot of time and effort into that junior department.
Oh, and can't Lois Hebert get those kids to sing? It's too bad her own little girl Joy is too shy to go on the stage. I'd hate to think that she'd grow up and never be able to face people.
Well, Lois's other girl, Judy, certainly doesn't have that problem. You can hardly keep her quiet. Her poor little brother, Jimmy, hardly gets to talk for himself.
Still true.
Isn't the new addition on the church wonderful? Now the children can have their own Sunday school classrooms.
Yes, and it's so nice to have a nursery for the young mothers with babies. God is certainly continuing to bless our church.
10 more years. By now, Gertie and Bertie know each other so well that they interrupt each other's sentence and finish it for them. I pity their poor husbands. I bet they can't get a word in edgewise. And if they want to get the last word in, they have to go outdoors behind the barn and say it.
Were you there last Sunday night to hear Dwayne Graham and the young people give their report on the Mennonite disaster service?
Yes, and it really is good that the young people are learning to give of their time like that, to help others in need.
Dwayne really has a lot of patience to work with our teenagers like he does.
Really, can you imagine trying to keep John and Ron Nickel in line? Plus Nelson France, Dwayne Penner, Junior Regier, and the Cleaver twins? Not to mention all those Hebert kids. Dwayne certainly is earning some stars in his crown.
Yes, and isn't it wonderful that we can run a bus to Fairview and pick up people? We're reaching a lot of young children that might never hear the gospel. Reverend Crisp said that we have around 40 kids coming on Wednesday nights.
Oh, and it's so nice that our elderly people have a ride to church. John Lorenz says that's what keeps him young, riding with all those active kids.
Well, maybe that's because he's nearly 90 years old, and he can't hear very well.
Speaking of kids, aren't those Crisp girls talented? And their mother, Lois, sews such beautiful dresses for them.
Well, I just hope when they grow up, they still want to wear those frilly dresses instead of jeans. Nowadays, you can't tell the girls from the boys.
Didn't Our Lady's Aid make a beautiful quilt for the MCC sale? It's so good that we ladies can still meet twice a month and quilt together.
It's too bad that most of the younger ladies need to work outside the home. There will soon be no one left to keep up the art of quilting.
Well, after 20 minutes, we've finally gotten to the present time. Can't stand more of Gertie and Bertie. I'm going out to the Fairview sale barn and listen to Bob Smith sell cattle. I can't understand him either, but that's a blessing of old age. You can't hear a thing.
Isn't it going to be a beautiful quilt that we're working on now for the MCC sale? I feel bad Mrs. Kirby can't stay all day to quilt with us, but I know she has her hands full with homeschooling the children and tending to all the needs of the whole family. I think she's really a super mom, and yet she has time whenever the church family need her.
When Arnold came to be our pastor, he was such a young man. We sure were robbing the cradle. But we raised him up in a hurry. Though it has been such a joy to see him and his family mature in the Lord.
Well, Bertie, time has certainly gone fast. Here it is 100 years after the start of the Saron Mennonite Church. There have been many changes occurring over the past 100 years.
Yes, when you look back, it has gone very quickly. I'm sure in God's eyes, this 100 years was just like the blink of an eye.
The Mennonites have been known as a people of tradition. Our heritage has been based on God, church, and family. As we look back, many of our traditions have changed. We have given up some of our old ways and taken on some of the new ways. As we live in a new modern age, it's difficult to see some of the changes in this world.
Yes, but some things never change. Our church was founded on God and a belief that His Word never changes. We started out as a small group, and as more and more families came, we grew to a large number. Through our faith in God and our dedication to this church, we've seen many pastors and missionaries go forth from this church.
That's true. But due to the job market and other circumstances, we've seen our church go back to a small group again. Yet, we still believe that God has a purpose for the Saron Mennonite Church. Over the past 100 years, many lives have been changed, and many communities have been affected as people have gone from here to other places. Let's continue to pray that if the Lord should tarry, Saron Mennonite Church will be serving the Lord in the year 2097.
Is your burden heavy as you bear it all alone? Does the road you travel harbor danger yet unknown? Are you growing weary in the struggle of it all?
to welcome you here on behalf of Saron Mennonite Church. In case you aren't aware, my name is Arnold Kirby. I'm the pastor, and on behalf of the whole congregation, I want to welcome you. God has been faithful. We've sung that this morning. And now our prayer is that we will be faithful in the next 100 years.
My sins were washed away when Jesus died in my place. It's all because of God's amazing, all because of God's amazing, all because of God's amazing grace. I'm in the Lord's army, yes sir. I'm in the Lord's army, yes sir. I may never march in the infantry, ride in the cavalry, shoot the artillery. I may never follow the enemy, but I'm in the Lord's army, yes sir. I'm in the Lord's army, yes sir. I'm in the Lord's army, yes sir. I may never march in the infantry, ride in the cavalry, shoot the artillery. I may never follow the enemy, but I'm in the Lord's army, yes sir.
My name is John Barkus. I'm one of the missionaries supported by this church. It was my privilege to serve in Africa for a number of years and then in Europe. And this church has faithfully prayed for me and supported me all these years. So it's a real delight to be here today.
I brought along this morning a treasured possession. It is a sheepskin, handwritten Hebrew scroll, not as old, of course, as the Dead Sea Scrolls, but much older than any one of us here, and much older than the Saron Mennonite Church. Jesus was a Jew. Jesus is a Jew. He always will be a Jew.
And I remember one thing, it was so very dry at that time. I hired a man to haul water into the cistern under the parsonage. And on the way to town, at Fairview, I mentioned to him how dry it was. Oh, he says, yes, it was really dry. You know, when that great flood came that we read about in the Bible, well, at that time we had about 1/4 inch. It was 46 years ago that I came here with my wife, children. 46 years. That's been a long time. I recall various things that happened at that time, and but I don't have the time to go into that.
As winter's chill may cause the tiny seed to fall, to lie asleep till waked by summer's rain, the heart grown cold will warm and throb with life anew. The Master's touch will bring the glow again. How big is God? How big and wide His vast domain? To try to tell, these lips can only start. He's big enough to rule His mighty universe, yet small enough to live within my
May the past 100 years be the roots of a growing and fruitful church for the next century. Serving Christ with you, Paul A. Baker, pastor for all your friends at Meade EMB Church.
We've always enjoyed this church, its ministry over the many years we've been here. Mom said we started about 1944, and I've been here then. I began when I was 12 years old. And something that has really blessed my heart is that I've always had good, sound Bible preaching. Hey, I want to commend you for changing denominations. That's neat. Fellowship of Evangelical Bible churches. That is a neat thing that you've done, and God bless you for it. I have forgotten how this church and the Mennonite churches have grounded so deeply in the German till yesterday here in the tent. I was standing over there, and I was going to talk to Roscoe Decker and Carlton Ham, and then Pastor Hubert came up and they started talking German. And man, they talked German. I noticed Carlton looked at me a couple times, and after they were through, I asked somebody, did they sell me? I didn't understand a word they said.
Hi, we're John and Jan Lorenz. Right now we're living in Guatemala. We're with the CAM International. Mom and Dad, well, Grandpa Lorenz was here at Orienta many times for a long time. We're working with the Kukchikel Indians. Right now we're doing an Old Testament Bible translation, about 3/4 of the way through. Jan works with women's Bible studies, weekly or monthly Bible studies.
Probably Saron Mennonite, more than any other individual church, prepared us for the mission field. Now we're in the middle of our Bible translation project, and we're down to the point where I can count on two hands the number of books left to finish. We praise the Lord for His faithfulness in keeping us, and also in your faithfulness in praying for us.
We're Willis and Ruby Wantock, and we serve with the Gospel Missionary Union. We began our ministry with the mission in 1961 when we went to Central America and to Panama. And since 1970, we've been on the northern Mexico border with Texas. We're presently in El Paso, Texas. That's where we live. We work across the river in Ciudad Juarez in church planting and lay leadership training.
Hi, I'm Ruby. Used to be Kane, now Wantock. My mother, Elsie Kane, has been a member in this church for many, many years. I grew up in the church from the time I was probably about 1 or 2.
The thing that impressed me about Saron Church was the men that Dad Kane and I rubbed shoulders with during the week. On Sunday, with their suntanned arms and their short sleeve shirts, because it was hot and there was no air conditioning in those days, those same men formed a chorus back on the platform that filled 2 or 3 rows, and could those men sing. I'll never forget that. I have never seen that in another church that I can recall. And that's a fond memory I have of Saron Church. We praise the Lord for what He has done in these 100 years here through Saron Church in Major County, Oklahoma. As far as I know, this was the very first complete Spanish Bible, published 42 years before our beloved King James Version. In 1569, a converted Catholic priest, having fled Spain because the opposition was out to get him, went to England and finally had his Bible published in the Netherlands. And that's the Reina Valera that we have today, and I have my own copy. This is the 1960 edition. And I praise the Lord for the Word of God.
First verse in Deutsch. Okay.
But I'm Betty Lorenz, Betty Dunham Lorenz, and I was born in Ohio. I am Norman Bud Lorenz's wife. We have spent many years in Nigeria with SIM. We went there in 1951. And this church, Saron Mennonite Church, has supported us financially and through prayer for all these years, and they have continuing to support us.
I'm Norman Lorenz, and I'm the grandson of the founder of this church. And Grandpa was pastor here for about 25 years. Grandpa was our first pastor that I remember, and he spoke German, and he was pastor for until he passed away at an age of about 70 years old. And our first English-speaking pastor was Reverend Epp. It would be interesting to me if I could have a list of all the missionaries that Saron has supported and prayed for during these 100 years. We, the Lorenz family, would like to dedicate this picture of the work of SIM in all nations to Saron Mennonite Church, that they might ever remember and be able to have a photographic picture in their mind of the many different tribes and nations that have come to know Christ as their Savior.
I was impressed with the love for the Word that these people had. When I found out not only did these people have a love for the Word, they knew the Word. They were trying to be obedient to that. The knowledge of the Word, once you have that, then of course the Spirit is more free to work with that. And then their desire for spiritual things. The title of it is The Idle Sickle. If you're a reaper, you have to have a sickle, right? See the fields of golden grain down in life's valley so wide, waiting to be gathered in, knowing it is eventide. See the harvest field so white, heads are bending neath the weight. Oh, the grain that fast is wasting. Can we tell what is their fate? See the rusty idle sickle, a witness to service true, dropped from the hand of the fallen. Is it now beckoning you? Look, the storm clouds are gathering. Nearer and nearer they come, soon to break forth in its fury. Will then our labors be done? The storm below is raging. The tempest takes its toll. The lightning breaks the darkness and the thunder begins to roll. Listen. The storm is upon us. The grain soon lost from our sight. The storm is sweeping the valley. Who knows what bringeth the night? Stop, for the hours are wasting, and souls are forever lost. Have you seen the idle sickle, and counted the awful cost? The Master is still calling for the reapers brave and true to take the idle sickle. Is the Master now calling for you?
Sam would agree that your faithfulness in so many areas was a great encouragement and made our time with you such a blessing.
This is Arthur Schmidt, and my wife isn't here. She's coming this afternoon. And we had a wonderful time of ministry in Ecuador, South America for 34 years, and then another 7 years in Mexico with the Willis Wantocks and many others that are known to this church. This church helped me to grow up in the Lord, and they've given me many opportunities to testify of the work of the Lord here in this church. We really feel honor to be able to be here today and partake in this 100th year celebration.
I was a member of this church when I was, before I was married, when I was a child, and I was in Sunday school when I was about 4. We moved on the farm. We were on the farm 24 years, and my husband passed away here in Earnestville.
Harvey and Anna Louise Schultz. I was born and raised in Saskatchewan, my wife from South Dakota. We served for 25 years in France as missionaries. Now I'm here today because I represent the Fellowship of Evangelical Bible Churches, which is what this church is now a member of, and I'm here to represent the fellowship.
Your missionary vision has reminded me so much of the missionary vision of my home church. Literally dozens went out, including Sam Epps' parents, who were the first missionaries who went out from our church back in the 1920s to China. And so that was the heritage I grew up with. And most of all, it was good to see you and to witness how you celebrated God's faithfulness. That's good. You have so adequately celebrated 2 themes here this weekend. One, the heritage that our forefathers have left for us. And 2, God's faithfulness. And I believe it is clear that our forefathers, above all else, dear friends, had a mission in life. I believe their primary focus was on living for God the way they understood the Christian life. And it gave purpose, I think you'd agree with me, it gave purpose to their family lives, it gave purpose to their church life, and it gave purpose to whole communities. I'm beginning to see young families whose parents have a single focus in life as well, a clear-cut mission to live for God and serve Him in this present age, and where their family life is focused first and foremost on that mission. There I'm noticing that children usually identify with that mission, and they usually pick it up and carry it forward, deciding to follow in their parents' footsteps. Then I'm convinced that should the Lord tarry, 100 years from now, our descendants are going to gather, and they are going to celebrate and reflect, as you have done, on God's faithfulness in the past.
Through my disappointment, strife and discontentment, I cast my every care on the Lord. No matter what obsession, pain or deep depression, I'm standing on the solid rock. I'm standing on the rock of ages, safe from all the storms that rages, rich in love, but not from Satan's wages. I'm standing on the solid rock. Even though he's gone now, I don't feel alone now. With comfort came the Spirit of the Lord. Now with His word to guide me, from temptation hide me, I'm standing on the solid rock. I'm standing on the rock of ages, safe from all the storms that rages, rich in love, but not from Satan's wages. I'm standing on the solid rock.
We'd like for this to be our final thought, as we've had a great time sharing and reflecting on the past and on God's faithfulness to us. Now the question is, will we be faithful? And so we sing this chorus together. Find us faithful.
Oh, may all who come behind us find us faithful. May the fire of
I'm Betty Penner from here in the Saron Mennonite Church, and I'd like to bring you a little bit of information on our cemetery at Orienta. The earliest record that we have on hand is for a Mrs. Heinrich France that was buried there 6th and 16th of 1900. We have approximately 221 people buried there. 25 have no stones. We started this project in 1990 with the Meadow County Historical Society. I did all of the Mennonite cemeteries, and so it has become a passion of mine to learn all of this. Stan Ratzlaff currently has the old map, and it took a lot of Xeroxing to get all this information on here. And we have the copy of the old church records, so that if anyone is interested in any of this, we'll be glad to help them out in any way that we can with cemetery records or with any church records.
This is Ruby Regier, and I'm Ella Francis. Ruby consented to make all our box, and she made 480 this morning, and we sure do appreciate her very, very much.
On behalf of the church, Saron Mennonite Church, I'm just want to say how thrilled I am with how this weekend centennial celebration has worked. I want to thank everybody who's had a part in the planning and the preparation and the follow-through of all the events, and I'm just thrilled with the fact that so many people came out to join with us in celebrating this 100th anniversary. I feel like the hand of God was upon the entire event, and we've had many, many positive comments from those who have attended. And we just want to thank everyone for praying for us and ask you to continue to pray for us in the future, that we would be faithful to God for another 100 years if He tarries.
Cheer